Hello and welcome to another episode of the CIRS Group podcast. I'm Jacie,
And I'm Barbara.
and today we are talking about headaches. This is a common CIRS symptom. In fact, it's one of the 37 symptoms in the symptom clusters, but we'll get to that in a second. Before we jump in, we are not medical professionals. This is not medical advice. If you have questions about your experiences with headaches, definitely make sure you're talking to your medical provider about it.
Very important. But yeah, headaches and migraines. This is something that we hear all the time. Pretty much everybody gets at least some form of headache or migraine, whether it's like a chronic, like major issue, or they just happen every now and then. But I mean, you could say that about the general population too, but in CIRS, it's like very consistent.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, it is one of the 37 symptoms in the symptom clusters that is used to help diagnose CIRS, but it's also one of the top five reported symptoms of CIRS. And just to give you context, the other ones are chronic fatigue, pallor, which is just like the appearance of sickness, orthostatic hypotension, and recurrent abdominal pain. So some of those symptoms aren't on the symptom clusters. They weren't statistically significant to CIRS, which is why they're not included there, but they are common symptoms of CIRS, and headache being one of the top five.
I didn't know about that word pallor. And now I feel like, when people say, wow, you look tired, which is already a terrible thing to say to someone, by the way, public
Don't say
service
that.
announcement. Also, don't say, hey, man, you look pallid.
You have the pallor of a Victorian child. Like, you just look ill.
Yeah. Oh my God. All right. Anyway, back to migraines and headaches.
So there are a lot of different reasons that you can have headaches or migraines from CIRS. We're going to talk about some of the most common ones today. One of them being elevated cytokines. Those are the inflammatory proteins that are very common in CIRS patients. And your immune system, through the process of having CIRS and that innate immune response, becomes liberated. So you're full of these cytokines. They're not regulated by any of your immune system, floating around, causing havoc, including headache, muscle ache, temperature regulation issues, and difficulty concentrating. Another common thing that people experience with CIRS is electrolyte imbalance. ADH osmolality dysregulation is very typical of CIRS. So a lot of us take electrolyte supplements for that, but essentially your brain does it. This is actually from Dr. Shoemaker himself. I took the proficiency partner course and he was like, your brain doesn't like sitting in pickle juice. And it's like, fair.
And delicious. Wait, that's probably a controversial statement. Go ahead.
Okay, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
Um, POTS is another common thing for CIRS people. POTS are postural orthostatic tachycardic. Oh, I was so close.
Dang. No
I
one
gotta,
needs to know this, by the way,
I
not
need to
even your
know this.
medical professional, but JC does. I'm just kidding.
We're Googling it.
All right.
Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. I missed the easiest
Oh my
word.
God. Oh, of course it's a syndrome.
It's a syndrome, but basically it's when you stand up and you feel really lightheaded or your heart begins to race. Some people with POTS have to walk with some sort of like assistance, like a cane or a walker, because it can become so debilitating every time they stand up, they're about to pass out. I was actually experiencing this recently. I went into for my big kid job, I went into a warehouse and it seemed to be a bit moldy, and I was just standing there and I could feel myself getting more and more lightheaded. Eventually I asked if we could go sit down and we did, but really common for CIRS people. Also, if you're thirsty all the time, feel dehydrated, or you're drinking water all the time, if you have frequent urination, or you experience static shocks when Barbara taking a drink, or you experience static shocks in areas where other people aren't experiencing static shocks. This would happen a lot to me when I was first diagnosed with CIRS. I'd be in a grocery store with my family and everything I would touch would shock me and they'd be like, what is wrong with you? Because I didn't have the same experience.
Yeah, the it's interesting and something I want to kind of, I guess, throw in here, although maybe it would be better to say it at the end, is like a lot of these things can get worse with exposure. Like exactly what Jacie just described. You walk into a crappy place or a moldy place, whatever, and it like hits you, and then the symptom hits, and the headache part of it is there, that lightheadedness. I was just walking the dog recently and just I had to turn around and come back because I just felt really lightheaded, kind of out of nowhere. That is maybe and again, maybe there was like something in the air outside that actually got me. But that can be a little bit of an alarm system for you, potentially, to know that you've walked into a bad spot and you should get out of there as soon as you can. Um, Another fun fact about POTS, not a fun fact at all, but a good friend of mine, um, she deals with that. And I didn't know this, and maybe this is common knowledge, but I didn't know. So I'll say it for those of you like me. You can actually tell a flight attendant when you get on a flight that you suffer with POTS, so that if you do pass out in the process of the whole plane movement situation, they don't assume you need like sugar, it's a blood sugar issue, or go that direction, that they know in fact that you're having more of that side of the problem. Um Words. But that's just something to think about. Make sure people know that about you if that's something that you're prone to do. Because obviously, if you faint out of nowhere, it's good for the people around you to be able to help and know what's going on.
Another thing that can contribute to headaches for CIRS patients, especially for women, is hormone imbalances. So if you notice trends of getting headaches around your cycle, it could be because those hormone fluctuations that you're experiencing are just a little dysregulated. And part of the Shoemaker Protocol is addressing those hormone imbalances. So it's definitely something that is addressed through the protocol itself. I have been following this creator on YouTube for 7 years now. And it's just like beauty makeup stuff, but she has shared a little bit about the chronic pain that she's experienced. And it all started with migraines. And eventually she was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is hypermobility. And as soon as like I learned about CIRS and the implication of Ehlers-Danlos, which is sometimes abbreviated as EDS, as soon as I learned about that, I immediately thought about her because she's really been suffering for years and years. She's tried to have surgeries to correct it, etc. But it does overlap with CIRS. So the haplotypes 11.352b and 4.353. And you can actually tell if you have Ehlers-Danlos. Some people can if they have the presentation that's hypermobility. One of the things you can do is if you can touch your thumb to your wrist fairly easily, like you very likely have the hypermobility type of Ehlers-Danlos. But it can cause an enlarged cerebellum, which can lead to migraines, which is what that creator is experiencing. And I'm trying not to be a freak about it and like comment on all of her videos, but I'm going to put some comments on her videos.
We may or may not have a link to her channel in the description, so you can do the same. I do. I mean, it's so important. I trust me. I run into it. Well, Jacie knows because I'll text her. Oh my God, it's everywhere. When we're watching content and somebody's complaining about how often they have to pee or how often they have headaches or how often blah blah blah, and it's so hard, especially if the people are famous in any respect. Like you want to tell them, and you because you want to tell anyone who's suffering, but like it's so hard to get to people like that sometimes and get them that message. But it sucks. And it's more common, obviously, than we would think, I guess.
In my big kid job, it has nothing to do with healthcare, but I was meeting with a customer this week and they were saying they get consistent migraines and since COVID they've just never felt quite right. And I was just like, oh, am I gonna make it weird right now? And I did. I did make it weird. They're
Good.
gonna look into CIRS.
Okay, good. Am I gonna make I have to make that choice too in my with my business coaching. We're talking about totally different things and all of a sudden it's like, wow, this person lines up perfectly with all these stuff. And I have told a few people like, you gotta feel it out, see if they're gonna be receptive. But yeah, it's tough.
Another thing that can contribute to headaches is multi-chemical sensitivity. So if I think we've all had this experience of you go into a space and you can just smell the chemical fragrance so strongly. And one, it's like, okay, what is that chemical fragrance covering? Is it mold? Is it endos? Maybe you don't want to know. But also that scent is so powerful that it becomes the trigger for your headache.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild how some of those neural pathways get formed from that process. And I mean, I'm sure any of our listeners are probably the type that avoid the laundry detergent aisle of any grocery store because it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm not even super sensitive to chemicals, but I have to like dash straight from my hypoallergenic non-scented brand and then, dash back out of there. It's tough.
Yet another thing is histamine or mast cell activation syndrome. So, a headache is a sign of a histamine response, which is very common in CIRS patients, both as an actual histamine response, meaning that your body is reacting to something in real time, but also we have a lot of learned histamine responses as CIRS patients because we feel so crappy so much of the time and we've been exposed for so long that this is one of the reasons that limbic retraining is so important for healing from CIRS is your body eventually, or your brain, I should say, eventually just overreacts to stimulus that it should not be reacting to. It's less of a physical reaction and it's more of a neurological reaction at that point. So, one of the things you can do in addition to histamine supports is limbic retraining to reduce the severity of those histamine reactions.
Yeah, that's really important. And I would also add, again, this is a through line, but if your histamine reactions are inconsistent, like maybe one day you have a meal and it causes histamine and another day you don't, um, the other culprit kind of working in tandem with the food aspect and the histamine reaction is the exposure that you may or may not be in. So that's the two together, man, will cause some problems and some elevation in symptoms like this. So it's tricky because it's hard, especially with anyone who suffered with GI issues. The big frustration is it's actually very difficult to determine, okay, this food is bad and this food is good. Because sometimes if you have it, only once a week, it's not so bad. But if you have it two times in a row, then it's all of a sudden bad. There's just always variables there. And so I just want to like, I guess, normalize that in case you're frustrated at attempting to figure out what is causing the problem, that it may also be yet another factor, environment, that's also causing the issue to creep up.
And finally, of the causes of headaches we're talking about today, chronic pain. So this can actually be identified on the genie as upregulated TRPV and may indicate that your biotoxin was ciguatera. But this chronic pain can manifest as migraines. Another thing I wanted to mention is if you have a kid that's under 11 and they're complaining about like one big symptom, headaches, for example, it's that's abnormal. Kids shouldn't have chronic issues of any kind. So if they're complaining about one thing like chronic headaches or growing pains that just don't go away, or if they're peeing their bed in the middle of the night, that's abnormal. So regardless of whether or not they have a certain number of the symptom clusters, like if it was my kid, I would definitely look into CIRS. I just wanted to put that in there at the end because my little brother, from the time he was like really little, like a toddler, he would have these migraines that were so bad he would puke and then pass out like from the lights were just so bright his body would just shut down, and that is really abnormal for a child and shouldn't be expected to just live through that.
Ugh, I can't even imagine. That sucks. Um, and if you are curious about more information about kids and CIRS and how that manifests differently, we will be having an episode out soon that's diving into that topic with a very special guest. So look out for that as well for more.
And if all of this just feels like, man, that's a drag, there's 72 different ways you can get a headache from CIRS. Luckily, the Shoemaker Protocol addresses all of these things. So if you are looking for relief from headaches or chronic migraines, definitely look into the Shoemaker Protocol. Each of the steps are laid out in the way that they are so that each next step becomes as effective and as efficient as possible. So for example, if it's due to exposure in the cytokines, that's one of the first things addressed. If it's due to hormone imbalance or to ADH osmolality dysregulation, those are later steps. So following the protocol and following it in order is important, but you can get relief from these chronic health issues that you may be experiencing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for more support and information on the Shoemaker Protocol and going through all of that for your healing journey, visit us over at theCIRSgroup.com.
We'll see you there.